I recently made a short film about camping, and in this video I'm going to break down how I edited it, from color grading to sound design to the shots I chose to use in it. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it, because otherwise this video won't really make much sense. So this is the timeline right here, and just in case you're wondering, I filmed this whole thing in 24 frames per second. And also, sorry about that background noise, I have multiple things with fans running right now, so that's probably what that is if you can hear it in the background. So first of all, I'm going to break down the overall flow of the video. I started it off with these tent shots, almost as if I was waking up in the short film going to do something. And then moving on to walking into the woods and reading my Bible. Now, I didn't want the whole short film to feel like it was going from point A to point B to point C. I just wanted there to be things happening on screen, not necessarily because one thing happened after the other. So after that, I chose to just do shots sitting next to the fire, because I decided that that would probably be a good idea just to show that in the beginning of the video, because after all, that's what people think of when they think of camping. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The rest was just canoeing and then sitting next to the water at the beach. But of course, the more interesting part is things like the color grading and sound design, which I'm about to get into. So for color grading, I basically just threw an adjustment clip over the whole thing and did my basic color grade, and then after that, I adjusted some parts that maybe were too strong, not strong enough, or I needed to adjust the white balance. For example, this shot of the Bible pages right here, when I added the color grade to it, it basically made the pages really yellow, so after I made that adjustment clip, I had to go in and, actually wait, let me just show you. I had to go in and just turn the temperature down right there, as you can see, just so the pages would be the color they actually are in real life. Now let me actually show you what I did to color grade it. I know if you're like a color grading expert, you're probably going to really get mad at this. I don't really know much about color grading, so I don't have a node tree. I have one node, and it was simple enough to work for me. Since I'm not filming in log, and my footage already looked pretty good straight out of camera, I didn't need to do much. For example, let me show you a shot right here. This is what it looks like without color grading, and this is what it looks like with color grading. So I'm just going to turn off that first node and basically go through everything I did to color grade this. First of all, for most of the clips, for the basic adjustment layer, I would add some contrast by crushing the shadows a little bit, not too much of course, and then raising the highlights. But for shots like this with water, sometimes you don't want to raise the highlights too much, because then the water will be overexposed, like right here. So I'd keep that somewhere around there. So I might just leave that for this example. I'd add some contrast by doing that, and the main thing I do to change the color of these clips is I would go into the gain right here, which in any other editor would just be like the highlights. It probably says the same thing in Premiere Pro, I'm not sure. And I would just very slightly put that a little bit more towards orange. And as you can see right here, just a slight change makes it even greenish. So I make that a little bit more orange, and even sometimes I'd add a little bit of blue to the shadows. And that's basically all I would do for color grading. But sometimes I would need to do different things. Like for example, this shot right here, I actually wanted to crush the shadows a lot more so you could see the mist floating over the water. Because when everything's brighter in a shot, you can't really see that like fog on the surface of the pond. And I wanted myself to be more of a silhouette on camera. Well, I think that's enough of color grading. Let me get into all this sound design right here. So first of all, we have the main track, which is the music. So it starts out for the first minute or so as kind of like an ambient sound, but then there's also that like piano thrown in there later, which I think honestly sounded really good. I made the piano come in at about this part when I was walking out onto the sand at sunrise, which overall I think was probably one of the best times in the video for it to come in. Now I'm going to talk about all the other sound effects I used. For example, in this canoeing clip, it's these ones right here. The sounds of the canoe bumping and stuff like that were actually added in. If you want to know where I get my music and sound effects from, it's actually audio. This video isn't sponsored, but if you use code SAVE70, you can get 70% off your first year. Sometimes audio didn't have exactly what I needed, so I went into a free website called like Pixabay or something, and I downloaded those other canoe sound effects I needed. Okay, I'm sorry, that RGB light just died. It'll be out for the rest of the video. So as you can see right here, there's this one canoe sound effect of the paddling, which is actually natural. Just listen. But I couldn't actually find any really good canoe paddling sound. Did I just say paddling? But I couldn't actually find any good canoe rowing sound effects, so what I did is I took the most clear one straight from my camera, what it captured when I was actually filming, and I just copied that and pasted it onto the other times where I was rowing. If you thought that these sound effects of me walking in the woods were real, those were actually sound effects I downloaded from audio. All I had to do was go into audio, click sound effects, and then search up like walking on leaves or something like that. So that's it for all those sound effects of things that actually happened in the shot, like the canoe and me walking in the woods and the fire and all those. But now I'm going to talk about the ambient sound effects I used to make the environment feel more immersive. Like this long sound effect I used of birds chirping just to make it feel more immersive and like you were actually camping. Things you might not think of when editing or even watching, but when they're there, it really helps a lot. I basically drew the birds chirping sound effect out to about the canoeing part, and then I started up something else later in the video, which is actually the sound of waves right here, and then I downloaded this lake ambiance sound, which is basically just birds chirping. I think there's some water, just stuff you would hear if you were actually on a lake. Those were very quiet in the background. I actually kept this lake sound effect at negative 22 decibels and this beach waves one at negative 14, just so that way they weren't like taking control, but they were still there. Well, I hope this breakdown of how I edited my short film helped you out a little bit, and maybe you even learned something new. And just in case you were wondering, it did take about 3 to 4 hours overall to edit, but that's not including things like finding music, which take a while in themselves. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.